inspiring and powerful drama that obviously still resonates today.
Yeah, it certainly is a movie that wouldn't be made today, that's for sure, for a lot of reasons, but it certainly does talk about today, whether they like it or not.
I don't want to reason to watch it. Your performance is so especially terrific. It's such an authentic, deeply affecting portrayal of a working class Southern woman. And you can feel your compassion for this character. And I wanted to ask you, can you talk a bit about what your reaction was when you first read the script and you first were familiar?
Well, certainly as an actor, it is my requirement to never have any compassion for the character. None whatsoever. To not have any judgment about the character whatsoever. It's my task to just simply find the history and to do my work that by then I finally knew how to do, to put her history into my history and bring them out as one. So that was my task, and that is the task of an actor. But certainly, biggest requirement is to never have any outside judgment, not to like them, not to hate them, not to think they were doing right or wrong or in between.
Just to embody them.
It just is.
Yeah. So when you read the character, did you have any idea this was going to be such a turning point in your career?
Well, the fact that it was the first film I ever starred in was automatically a turning point, and it had taken me so long, and I had to fight so hard to get there. But that it was with Marty Ritt, and I looked at it honestly almost as an extension of the work I had done in studying with Lee Strasberg for so long. I started in, you probably know, some of you, I started in television in 1964. And I started in situation comedy television at a time when most situation comedy television was, the star of them were women. And basically you lived and you died on that spot. You never got out. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted other things that slowly became evident to me as I began to grow into this world. And I began to study with Lee. And the task of getting an audition, I mean, not even to get in the door, to get on the list, was extraordinary. Because at that time, I was identified with the Flying Nun. And I'm sorry, no one wanted anything to do with me. And I would hear people, I mean, you know, it's a whole other conversation. But when I finally got in on an audition, I heard the director yelling at the casting person who brought me in. Why was she wasting his time bringing me in? But I knew all of that. By then, I had learned how to use that as my fuel. And I was so fucking pissed. So by the time I got to this, it was the first time someone asked me to come in and meet with them. And I was doing another movie playing the girl somewhere just to survive. And it was with Marty Ritt. And instead of him having me jump through hoops and he didn't really want me, or he didn't think the studio didn't want me. He did tell me that. The studio doesn't want you. No one here wants you. And I've heard that, I did hear that before. But Marty said, I do. What? That was amazing for me to hear. I want you. And if you want to do this, I will fight for you. And that was like, there was a turning point right there. You could just say, well, that's it. I don't even need to do the movie because just to hear that gave me fuel. But having the experience of doing this with Marty, who became so incredibly important in my life as an actor, as a human, taught me so much about the world, about all that we are fighting right now. It was instrumental, but I could never have known how important it was. It was, the film was hugely important, but more than the film was everything that Marty gave me, taught me, and led me to think and know and feel.
And as you mentioned, he was really a person who had a great social conscience. He was blacklisted during the McCarthy era, and he was known for bringing that into his films.
Yeah.
Did you feel that he awakened your social consciousness, or without a doubt?
Without a doubt. I had none. I had zero. And I had no education, really. I had graduated from high school, sort of. I had to go to night school just to get out of high school because all I did was just be in the drama department at a time when luckily they had a drama department, thank you God. And it was Marty that really, not in a dogmatic way, started to teach me about being a human and caring about other humans. And it had a lot to do with ultimately understanding how he saw the world, but how he picked the films he wanted to do. Every one of them talks about the human condition in one way or the other. And it was the beginnings of me being able to look outside of my own little hole into what there was out here, the world. So it was a huge turning point.
And you mentioned studying with Lee Strasberg. Did you, in preparation for this, I listened to the Howard Stern interview you did with, talking about your work in Lincoln, but you mentioned staying in character and method acting. Did you do that with Norma Rae as well?
Method has gotten a very bad name. Mostly it's gotten a bad name by people who don't use method at all. The method is a lot of what the Union Theater was initially called, of what Lee taught, what group the whole group theater taught. Marty engulfed us all in this world. He brought us there. We had 2 weeks rehearsal in Opelika, Alabama. We lived with these people. We worked in the mill. I learned to work the mill. So of course you lived the life. Of course you stayed in it. Of course you spoke the language. You heard. You had the ear for how they spoke and how they lived and how they walked and talked. And method doesn't mean that you turn into a crazy person and you refuse to talk to anybody who doesn't call you by your character's name, or no, it means you're just in it. You lived it. I was there. I was always talking in that dialect. I couldn't get out of it. So it wasn't almost like conscious. It was because everybody else was talking like that. So, and yes, but not in a fanatical way where you hear some actors now are just, they alienate their other actors because they're not acting, they're not behaving like that. And maybe it's because I'm a woman, and I've always worked like that. Certainly I worked like that in Lincoln with Daniel Day, who it becomes a bit of a fanatic, I must say, but he's very good at it, but still he can be a bit rigid with it, but I loved it because I worked like that since I got to film, and because I'm a woman, I hid it. I would hide it and not, so that I wouldn't alienate people or have people think I was weird. And the way I would hide it is I would sit in a corner when they were setting up a scene or whatever, and I would do needlepoint, or I would do something that looked like I was very busy and nobody could talk to me. And in reality, I didn't want anybody to talk to me. So, no one did talk to me. And it was my way of always just being in character. With Daniel, I didn't have to do that because he was way out there with it, so I was too. Yay, we like this.
Well, and speaking of absorbing that way of talking, you're a California girl, you were born in Pasadena, you nailed that, yes, Pasadena, you nailed that Southern accent so well. Did you work with a dialect coach? How did you do that? No?
No, because the dialect coach was Opelika, Alabama. It was just being there and working in the mill and hearing it, hearing everybody talking to them, and they forgot that you were an actor. You were just one of them. You wore those clothes. You looked like that. And you asked them about their kids and the life and where do you live, and I'm living over there, and it's almost a better way, I think, of learning a dialect than having a dialect coach. Also, this doesn't exist now. You don't get to go to the location and rehearse the film for 2 weeks. With another film I did, Places in the Heart, we rehearsed for 3 weeks. It's unheard of today. You don't do that. You land on the set and the next day you go to work. You barely have a rehearsal when the camera's set up. Okay, can we have one rehearsal before we roll this thing? It is a luxury that doesn't exist anymore. And I don't call that a luxury, I call that the work. But it doesn't exist anymore. And it's really, I think, when you're doing deep character work, it's really hard to get there on your own. But as the actor, you're hired to do the job. You can't blame it on anybody else. You can't say, well, they didn't give me any time to rehearse, so that's why I sucked. They don't care. It's if that's the way this company is working, then it's up to you to find your own way into it. You have to find your own time to rehearse, your own time to practice the character, the dialect, the walk, the rhythm, anything that you think is the character. It's hard.
Sometimes you hear people saying, well, I took time to be with my co-star, we, went to dinner together, we did different things together. But I had read that in this case, Marty Rae wanted to keep you apart from Ron, so because you were from different worlds, is that?
No, I would have done that anyway. I pretty much just stay by myself. I mean, anybody who knows me here, and one or two people do, I thank you very much, but no thanks. I would rather just go and be by myself anyway. So that really, Marty never had to say anything like that to me. Just you talk about Lincoln for a minute. I didn't really know Daniel, and when I came in to do Mary, they'd been shooting for a week or so, and there was no rehearsal. There's a perfect example. No rehearsal, nothing. I'm going, oh my God. And so Daniel and I would text each other, and I loved it. He and I would text within the dialect of the characters, because there's a dialect at the time. Which is very unethical. We're texting in the dialect. Okay. But so by then I had to get to Mary, and I didn't really know him. And so I invited him for a walk. And I said, I will be over there at your house at such and such a time. Be prepared. Because that's what Mary would have done anyway. Get your hat on, get your shoes on, we're going for a ride. And so he responded wonderfully. And we at least had this one day where Daniel and I just walked all around Richmond, walking, and we were completely the character. He was Lincoln and I was Mary, and there wasn't a hiccup, there wasn't a talk of let's do that. I mean, there was a moment when I came into his house, and I remember he looked at me like, are we doing this? And we wanted to, he said, do I want an espresso? And I was like, a what? So that was wonderful to have somebody in that land with me. But nowadays, you just have to do it by yourself. And I'm fine. I'm good by myself anyway. Just don't invade my space. Just go.
Did you, by any chance, keep those texts? Those would be fascinating.
I think I do have some. I don't know where they are, but I saved everything in the kitchen sink. And I think in my many boxes and boxes and boxes of stuff, I think I do have some that I found a way to, in my very ineptitude electronically, I somehow printed or copied or did something. I do.
Good, yeah. So I understand the character of Norma Rae was loosely based on Crystal Lee Sutton, but she was a textile worker in North Carolina. But was she kind of a composite of people, or yeah?
Yes, she was. It was loosely based, I believe the Ravages wrote her story. It was loosely based on a New York Times Magazine story or something of that nature. They tried to reach out to Crystal Lee to, you know, invite her to be part of the process. And from what my understanding is that she didn't want to be because she wanted to make her own, and her own film or somebody. There was Barbara Koppel, who is a famous documentary maker, was doing a documentary on her, and so she wanted that to be hers. She didn't want to be a part in any way, shape, or form with Norma, our version. Because of that, and I think there was a time when it caused some ill will on her part. I hope not, but later it was healed. I hope when the Norma came out and Crystal Lee was still fighting a battle at that point with a different male, and she asked would I come and be a part of some march that they were having, and I did. So. I think that helped her feel that we didn't mean to cut her out. She just didn't want to come on board. As far as I know.
Interesting. So I heard that several studios had turned down the project before 20th Century Fox took it on, and that the role was turned down. I don't know how apocryphal that is, but you know the names that get bandied around are like it was turned down by Jim Fonda.
It was. Marty told me when I came in to meet with him, it's sort of a long story. When that happened, I hadn't even read the script yet because I had flown in from Tuscaloosa, Alabama. My mother read it because she was home with my youngest sons, and she was, as I'm trying to get ready, by then I had learned how to audition, and I knew then that you had to go in as the character. I knew that. I had achieved a little bit of success in transition because I landed the role of Sybil, and that happened. Again, where I go into a room and they would just say, "No one here wants you." Okay, good. Well, that makes me feel really great. But what it would do is it would fuel me, and I knew that you don't go into an audition as Sally or whoever the actor is. You go in as the character. Now in Sybil, it was a little hard to decide which one was I, but I decided to go in as Sybil herself. But Marty asked me in, and since I hadn't read the script, I thought, well, I don't know who to go in as. I don't even know who Norma Rae is. So I just went beige. I just go very like a blank slate, because I thought I'm going to have to, dance and sing and convince him that I'm correct. And he said to me, it had been offered to 5 other actresses, all of the top 5 actresses of the day. One said to me, I would go, "Really? You want her?" And he said that they all turned it down, and that's when he said, "But I want you. The studio doesn't want you, and no one else wants you." but I do, and I will win. And he did.
Confidence.
Yeah.
So, is it true that it was made on a very tight budget? Also, that was per producer Alan Ladd, that everyone's salary was limited. Did you have to scrimp on certain things?
Did I have a salary? I don't think I did. I'm not sure. I mean, literally, because it was so hard for me to get there, I honestly think I was paid like $20,000 maybe. You know, so I'm not saying, you know, that's not a cut from my normal, you know, price. That was my price, I think. I didn't have a price. I think it was on a tight budget, but I don't really know because all of that was kept away from me. But I know that when they started to see what Marty was sending to them, this being Fox and Laddie, that they became very, they backed the film, not with more money, but certainly with their passion. Because we later, the first time an audience saw it was in Cannes, and Laddie was there and everybody was there. I didn't know what it was. I had a hard time believing it was actually going to be a movie. I just thought it was this great experience we all had. And that was another moment of my life that, you know, changed me, surely.
It's very emotional to get the kind of reaction.
Well, it was, you know, first of all, I'd never been to Europe, basically. I was, you know, I just had this weird backed into life. And I went to Cannes, and with Marty and the Ravages and Bo and Laddie, and then Fox was there. And it just seemed like, wow, this is really fun. They're gonna see the movie too? Oh my goodness. This was the first, I had seen it with my mother. They screened it for my mother and I at Fox, you know, a few weeks before we went to Cannes. So I knew what the movie was. And my mother, who had been an actress, and was under contract to Paramount in the 40s, but she was great and supportive and all that good stuff, but she kind of was of her own era, and when the movie was over, she went, "He didn't even use any music." But no, he didn't. It's just like you. like, yeah, it kind of is, you know. But there we were at Cannes, and we were at the old theater, the old opera house. It subsequently has changed, and they set you up in a big high balcony way above the audience, and we sat there in the front row, and so like you could, you know, fall down, like it looked like 100 flights down, but into the audience down below. And there was the movie, and I remember just like, you know, my heart thudding away as if it were opening night. I didn't have to do anything, I just had to sit there. And when the movie was over, now no one had seen the movie in the United States. There wasn't any reaction whatsoever. When the movie was over, it was quiet, and I thought, oh, that's it. You know, okay, can we just go? Is this it? And all of a sudden, people stood, turned, and cheered. And they applauded, standing ovation, for 15 minutes. And I wanted to like crawl away, and Marty made me stand, and he stood with me, but then he backed away and went like that to me. It just was astonishing because I had worked so hard, and I never ever thought that here I would be and this moment would be happening, and it did, and I just sort of floated out of that place and immediately wanted to go home and shut the door. Please, I just want to get out of here, you know. But it was astonishing, and then Norma went on to do for me certainly this astonishing thing where I won every acting award available. Including a 10. And my first Oscar. Yeah, it just was hard. It became, with each moment, it became harder and harder to even fathom. What? But that was then, and this is now.
We have to talk about that iconic scene where you're holding up the Union sign, and it's the quintessentially American scene, and people were cheering in the room here. And did I ask Marty how angry you could be, and that during the scene where you're being taken out and you're kicking, that you actually broke somebody's ribs in the struggle?
I did ask Marty how angry, but the time I asked Marty how angry could I be was early on when Norma gets angry because her mother can't hear, and gets angry at one of the management guys. That was, and we shot this movie almost all in sequence. Things you can't do today. And I said to Marty, how angry can I be? Because from my career at that point, I was always held down. I was always held back, held down. Be nicer, be cuter, be sweeter, be something. And for me to be allowed to be angry. And I was raised in the 50s, so little girls didn't get angry. My grandmother would say to me, who was very Southern, which might have helped with the ringing in my ear of what a Southern sound was. When you'd get angry as a child, she'd say, don't be ugly. The little girl, now she didn't say that to my brother. She said it to me. Don't be ugly. Well, I'm just going to be as ugly as I want. But I think, evidently, when we did this scene where they're carrying me out to the car, I did some damage. You know, these things happen.
Is there anything that you've never told people regarding the making of Norma Rae that you want to tell us tonight?
Gosh, I don't know. Everything that would be on the screen. Gosh, what would it be that I haven't told anybody? Not really. I mean, I've written about this time in my life a lot. I think one of the things that sits in my head about it is it's so illustrative of how difficult it is for women who are mothers and who have children to work. And luckily I had my mother, but still I was away from my sons for a length of time. And again, I can't remember how long the shoot was, 6 weeks, 7 weeks, 8 weeks, something like that. They came down to visit. My sister brought them down because my mother was with my brother with his kids. And my oldest son, who is now a highly successful writer, producer, showrunner person, and has had nominations of his own, he was like, what, 10 or something? And we were in the motorhome, which is what these things were then, and he wanted to know about the story. He's a writer. It was even then, it was like he wanted to know what the story was. And I told him what the story was, and he started to cry. And he started to cry, and I said, "Oh, Pete, what? What?" He just said, "It just, I just, you know, I worry about her," he said. And when he was supposed to just stay, you know, like 5 days or 6 days, it was hard for me to incorporate that into this world because I was so focused here. And Pete begged me, "Please let him stay with me. Let him stay with me, please." He said he would just be quiet in the trailer. "Please let me stay, please let me stay." And I didn't. I said, "No, you go home, it's gonna be great, you see your dad." And to this day, I so wish I had, because I think, well, would it really affect the work? And you know, he wanted to just be there and be quiet and be in the motorhome, and maybe he wouldn't, he was just 10. But this is what mothers, and I'm sure fathers have it, but I think mothers have it worse, that you are forced to leave your children and go do this other part of you. I had to go do this other part of me. And it was always a part of me that I grappled with. And I never got over it. And I would say to Peter, "You never got over that, did you?" And he'll go, "What? I don't even remember it." And it's like, I'm still haunted by it.
That sounds like motherhood.
Yeah.
Well, was it Carl Jung said something, and you quoted this in your book, because I just read your book, where Carl Jung said that
Yes.
the thing about mothers whose dreams, parents whose dreams weren't realized.
Yes. What is the exact quote? It's a great quote about the unlived dreams of a parent is visited on the child.
So you lived the dream. So you did get to live that dream.
I lived the dream, but even so, my dreams got handed down, I think, to my children, even though my dreams have been lived, but they lived in my dreams with me, I think.
Well, I'm getting the high sign. That's a beautiful note to end on. And thank you so much.